welcome back to Shark Hour. I am so sorry it's been so long. The end of the year got kind of hectic last year, and yeah, I just couldn't find a moment to do it. But we are back now, and I'm hoping to do it once a month now. And it's going to be on different platforms, whether it's on YouTube or Instagram Live. But I'll let you know ahead of time on our social media. But this week we are joined by Megan McCubbin, who is a TV wildlife presenter and zoologist. So before we jump into some of that stuff, I'm going to give a few announcements since we've been away for a while. But our team actually is in the Florida Keys right now doing some research. So if you've been following our social media or seeing our stories, you've seen probably some posts from there. But we're doing some awesome stuff down there, working on Jasmine Nice's master's project, who is our station administrator. So doing some stuff with bull sharks and also just trying to get a population assessment of different sharks around there, because some of our Bimini sharks travel down there in that area. So we're trying to see what are they doing. So pretty cool. I also have a few announcements about some exciting opportunities happening at the Bimini Shark Lab. This summer, we are so excited to be announcing 2 teacher/educator course scholarships this year. Last year, we had our first one, and it was amazing and incredible, and all of the teachers that came had such an incredible experience. And so if this is something you're interested in, head to our website, check it out, and definitely apply. The deadline is March 1st. And also our internship application is open now too, as we are accepting a lot of interns. So if that's something you're interested in as well, visit the website and be sure to apply. But without further ado, let's jump in and speak with Megan. So hi, Megan. Thank you so much for joining me today.
Hi, Bailey. Hi, how are you doing?
Good, very good. Yeah, do you just want to start with a brief intro about yourself?
Sure. So my name is Megan McCubbin, and as I was very kindly introduced, I'm a wildlife TV presenter and conservationist. But I like to think of myself as a bit of more of a science communicator. I tend to try and digest as much science as I can and try and regurgitate it out in digestible format. So I guess that's kind of what I do. And I'm from the UK, and I did 2 volunteer placements at Bimini Shark Lab and absolutely loved every single second of it.
Awesome. Yeah, so you mentioned where you were from. How would you say this has influenced the trajectory of your career?
Going to Bimini or being
Or just in general?
in general. Well, I'm really lucky. Like, I love the UK. It's got some amazing wildlife, and often wildlife that's like underappreciated. So I grew up and I had like badgers in my garden and foxes, and now I spend a lot of time up in Scotland, and I've got pine martens, and that's something that's really exciting in the UK. If you've got pine marten in your garden, very lucky. So we're very lucky to sometimes see them. So yeah, growing up around the UK, wildlife is always accessible. So it was always all around me. I grew up with, a wildlife loving stepdad as well. So it was just kind of a part and parcel of what I did. So I just knew that whatever career direction I was going to go in, animals had to be a part of it. And then the more you get to love animals, the more you realize actually it's not enough just to love them anymore. We have to do stuff to protect them and use our voices for them. So I turned my attention from just like, oh my God, it's a badger, I love it. It's like, okay, what can I do to help this badger? And then it kind of just set me going and asking and trying to get answers for bigger and bigger questions, which I'm often still trying to find the answers out to today.
Yeah, definitely, definitely. And so this is really funny. So I was watching a movie, I think yesterday or the day before, and it took place in England and it was beautiful. I remember I was like, oh my gosh, that's England. So it looks absolutely gorgeous down there. And I hope one day I can make it down to see all that it has to offer, because it was so funny. I was like used to seeing stuff from movies like of the London area and stuff, and they were like up in the countryside. It looked beautiful. I was like, oh my gosh.
Yeah, there's some stunning areas and some gorgeous coastline as well. Like, the coastline around the UK for me is like my favorite, because I love being by the ocean, obviously.
Yeah.
That's why I'm here. But it's amazing. But like, we've got coral reefs in the UK off the coast of Scotland. We've got 40 different species of sharks. We've got loads of amazing biodiversity in the seas, but because it's so cold, very few people tend to dip their heads under the water. But get a dry suit, wetsuit, get on in, 100% worth it. It's kind of an unsung place, really, the UK, in terms of its wildlife. And whilst it's not perfect, far from it, it is a really beautiful landscape.
Yeah, amazing. What are some of like the most common shark species that you get around there?
Oh, you get loads. Well, quite a lot of small shark species. So you get a lot of kind of the catfish, and you get like spiny dogfish and things like that. But I was really envious of the person that got a photograph of this, but sometimes we get thresher sharks,
Oh, wow.
which is Really cool, really cool. But we got a lot of basking sharks, especially in the summer months around Wales and the north coast of Scotland. And I've tried to go out and see basking sharks so many times, and every time I go out, without a word of a lie, all I'm told is, "Oh, you should have been here yesterday."
Oh,
So I feel like they just don't want to meet me.
oh. So something I always say
100%.
with that too. Yeah, I feel like your moment is coming. Whenever I don't see them, I just say, it wasn't my time. And
Yeah,
that was for a reason. So
yeah.
the day
But
you
there's
do
only
see
so
them,
many times you can say that to
yeah,
yourself.
that is true though.
Yeah.
But one day I believe you'll see it and it'll be incredible.
I hope so. I hope so. They're the most amazing like how, a shark that big surviving off plankton as a filter feeder. Oh my God. Like, yeah, just amazing. Amazing
Incredible.
animal. Hmm.
So cool.
Yeah.
Yeah. So Megan, where did you go to school and what did you study?
So I went to the University of Liverpool, which is a fantastic university where I studied zoology. And I was really torn. I didn't know whether to go between zoology or marine biology, because I had such an interest in kind of both areas. But I just figured, like, for me, zoology was good because I have a lot of experience kind of with terrestrial conservation as well. And I figured if I did zoology with marine modules, I could do both. But if I did marine biology with a few terrestrial models, it was harder to kind of focus more. I couldn't easily flip between the two. So I ended up going with zoology, and yeah, it was brilliant. I really enjoyed my time there. I got to do lots of practical things. We did a workshop to Uganda and did stuff on chimpanzees. So it was a real variety of different stuff. And it was a great uni.
Yeah, definitely. So while you were there too, I see that you conducted a thesis investigating ring-tailed lemur social dynamics in relation to enrichment practices. This sounds
Yeah.
so fascinating to me. Can you explain a bit more about this work?
Yeah, of course. So that was my dissertation, my undergrad dissertation. And I was like really lucky that growing up, my family helped run a sanctuary on the Isle of Wight, which focuses, it used to be called the Isle of Wight Zoo, but now it's called the Wild Heart Trust. And it focuses on the rehabilitation of ex-circus and ex-pet trade animals. So that's where I got a lot of my experience growing up. I got to know the place when I was 12 years old. So I spent my teenage years basically at the sanctuary. And I worked a lot with tigers and lemurs. Those were kind of two of my favorite things.
Yeah.
And yeah, I was thinking about doing my undergrad dissertation and what I could possibly do it on. And tigers are great and they spend most of the day sleeping. So I was like, right, lemurs will be really good fun. They'll be really active and I can do something interesting with the group that I've gotten to know, for years when I was growing up.
Mm-hmm.
So I kind of came up with this idea of a study where I gave them different enrichment items. So I had a plastic snake, I gave them a mirror, I gave them lots of different things to basically see how they interacted with them based on their hierarchical rank.
Oh,
So
cool.
the interesting thing about lemurs is that it's always dominated by females. Like females are the boss, they're in charge of everything.
Okay.
And I wanted to know whether the males that were lower ranking had the same kind of positive effect with enrichment as the higher ranking females, and whether there should be more emphasis given to enrichment with lower ranking individuals than higher ranking individuals. So I really enjoyed it. It was really good fun. I spent hours and hours and hours watching GoPro footage because I would set up the GoPro and put the enrichment in there and leave for like 2 hours to see what they did. Yeah, and I got them, they do this really funny thing where they've got the scent glands on their wrists, and they put their tails between their leg and they rub their tails with their wrists as a form of kind of scent communication, because then they get their tail out and they waft it like this, and they were just doing this in front of the mirror the whole time.
Oh my gosh, that's
Brilliant.
funny.
So I loved it. They were either that or they were sleeping in the corner and not interested, as was the case with the plastic snake. But the mirror was a real hit with ring-tailed lemurs. They loved that. So that was
awesome.
worth noting.
Yeah, and I just want to point out too, that's a really good example too of how transferable like wildlife sciences can be, because with you watching like GoPro footage for like 2 hours, we do that in marine biology a lot too, because like just placing cameras underwater, and we call them like the BRUVs, like baited remote underwater video surveys. And then a lot of that is sitting in a computer looking at an analysis of what fish showed up the whole time. So that's just an example for anyone out there that maybe is like, oh, I am struggling to get experience in marine science. Well, if you get experience in terrestrial system as well, it's transferable. It's all transferable. Just trying to be a better scientist.
Absolutely. I think my first week I did a few of those BRUVs analysis.
Yeah.
And it was my first time doing marine science. I was like, what fish is that? But it's great because you have, help with identification. So that's never something that should put you off doing it.
Right.
And then it's great. And it's great fun.
It is. I love it. I know you just get to watch, oh my gosh, what's gonna show up? Just excited
Yeah,
the
yeah,
whole
who's
time.
coming? It's like a surprise. It's like Christmas. Like, who's coming?
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Cool, cool. Yeah, so then you mentioned a bit of some of the opportunities you had in undergrad, but what other opportunities, such as like internships, research, study abroad, volunteerships, did you participate in during your undergrad, if any, and how have these helped you in your career today?
Yeah, I think it's always so important to do as many practical skills as you possibly can do. Getting into conservation can be really tricky, and a lot of the time, getting into jobs and places which essentially you're paid to work, you have
Yeah.
to have practical experience, and it can be really, really hard. And I was always really aware of that factor, so I just really worked on getting those internships and that kind of practical experience. So I did it from the age of about 10. Actually, I was trying to do volunteer
That's
programs.
awesome.
I did as much as possible. I used to work at a wildlife hospital for a while, so I used to look after sick and injured foxes and young birds that got brought in.
Oh,
So I'd spend my weekends there, and then I've already mentioned the Wild Heart Sanctuary, and I'd spend pretty much every weekend and summer holiday of my schooling years there. And then when I got to university, I was really determined to do more scientific
mm,
internships, which is why I went to Bimini, because I got a taste of what it's like to be a PhD student and what it's like to kind of gather data in the field with
mm.
amazing animals,
Yes.
and to kind of live in that remote area and understand that dynamic, I suppose. And I also went and I lived in China for 4 months. I was working with bears, rescued from the bear farming industry. So I was a behavioral specialist for bears, for the charity called Animals Asia, which was another mind-blowing experience.
Wow.
And then I went and worked in Africa as well. So I'm dyslexic. I struggle academically sometimes. I don't think in the conventional way, and sometimes exams can be quite challenging.
Yeah.
So I knew for me to get where I wanted to be in conservation, I needed to have a really strong practical fallback. So I focused really hard on that, and as well as hard on my academic studies, but
Yeah.
it was important for me to get that practical experience too.
Yeah, that's incredible too. And like, yeah, it's amazing the diversity of opportunities you've had too. And you mentioned a bit about going to China and working with the bears, and I was going to ask about that a little bit later too, if you could speak a bit more on that and what that organization stands for, how you found out about that opportunity, because it sounds really, really incredible.
Yeah, of course. So the charity, as I said, is called Animals Asia, and it's founded by an amazing woman, and she's one of my absolute heroes. She's called Jill Robinson.
Okay.
And she set up the charity to rescue bears that were in bear farming farms.
Mm,
And it's a horrible practice. It's really, it's really sad across parts of Asia, so China, Laos, and Vietnam in particular.
mm,
And it's typically Asiatic black bears, but sometimes Tibetan brown and some bears as well. And they're kept in these tiny, cramped cages that are so small they can't really turn around.
mm,
And then bile is extracted from their gallbladder, and it can be supply and demand, or it can just be, depending on what catheter is inserted into their stomach.
mm,
It can just be a constant drip feed of bile.
mm.
And the amount of infections and ulcers and things that these bears get, and they get, they're biting on the bars, so they get problems with their dentition. It's awful, really terrible.
Mm.
Um, and it was bear farming is always something I knew about, and I found it really troubling, and I wanted to know what I could do to help. So I did a bit of research into it and came across Animals Asia, and they had this brilliant volunteer program.
Mm.
So I applied, and very luckily managed to get a spot as a behavioral specialist volunteer. So I went out and I would sit with an ethogram, which is essentially a piece of A4 paper with a whole list of behaviors on it. And I was given a bear house. I think my bear house was number 10, and it had, I think, 14 bears in it. And I would go in the afternoon with my ethogram, with my list of behaviors, and I'd sit and I'd tally off what I saw.
Mm.
And I was trying to understand one female bear's behavior in particular, because she'd recently moved enclosures, so trying to make sure she'd settled. So I was there to kind of analyze her behavior and make sure that she was as settled as she could be, and then to recommend any possible changes that might make her life a bit better. But it is
Yeah.
this charity just gives a whole new lease of life to these bears, and just watching them going from where they were to then being able to kind of play with one another. They love like having a big bath, and they get they got about 4 kinds of enrichment every single day. So
Oh.
apart from being in the wild, which sadly they can never be again, you can't, it's impossible to put it back in the wild, but
Mhm.
they've got the best lives possible, and it was a real joy to see that and to see people working hard to protect them.
Definitely, definitely awesome. And before I go on real quick, I'm sorry if you can hear our dog barking in the background to everyone. We have like a tour group coming in, and so he's barking at all the people right now. So sorry to anyone if they can hear that in the background.
It wouldn't be the lab without a few dogs barking.
Exactly, exactly. But yeah, that's super incredible, and how amazing to be a part of something where you can really like make a difference and see that difference as well. And like and I'm sure that's like impacted you as a TV wildlife presenter today too, with trying to speak on conservation issues as well.
Yeah, well, to be honest, that bear internship was the reason why I became a TV presenter accidentally, and it was never something I was like ambitioned to do. Like, it's never something I thought, I'm gonna go and be a wildlife presenter.
Yeah.
It never really occurred to me that I could do it.
Yeah.
So I got back from China, and I was I think I was at university for 5 years. I was in the middle of my third year. I just come back from the summer, finished up in China, and then I had someone who I knew at the BBC message me saying that they've got a series. It's going to be all about what illegal wildlife crime, and did I have any ideas, because one of their stories had fallen through.
Okay.
So I said, well, funnily enough, I've just got back from China, and I've never actually been to a bear bile farm. I'd only been to the rehabilitation sanctuary.
Yeah.
Why don't we go and do a story about bear bile farming? So about 3 weeks later, we were on a plane and we were filming in Vietnam, and we were going into the farms themselves. And there's a couple bears that I interacted with in the farms that you just, in that moment, as awful as it is seeing these bears, I mean, it's the most powerful motivator to bring those stories to light. And I think that's probably why I do what I do, is because I want people to know about bear bile farming. I want people to know about overfishing sharks. I want people to know about these really horrible topics, because ignorance is no longer bliss. We've got to be aware about them in order to do something about them. So it's kind of I think my job or my role is to try and put light on these stories that are often unheard or swept under the rug.
Awesome. Yeah, absolutely. And it is, even though they are hard stories, it's important to share them, because then, like you said, like ignorance is not bliss anymore. And because we have so many outlets and ways to share it as well, and so many different tools as science communicators, which is incredible, because so many different ways that we can get involved and share a message. So yeah, so even though it's hard to tell those stories, it is important.
Yeah. It's hard to watch. It's hard, I'd love to not have to go and be in the middle of a bear
no,
farm
of course.
reporting on it. These stories are challenging, but I think the more challenging ones are the most important ones.
Absolutely. Cool. And then this kind of going along with like your science communication and way to like share your tools as well. You have a very like big love for photography as well. So when and how did you discover your love of photography?
Well, I think by accident, really. I mean, I quite like I think it comes down to kind of me being a little bit more I have a bit of a creative mind, in the sense of, like, I learn visually, and I used to love art, and I love all that kind of thing. And I often was trying to think, well, how can I like marry up the science and the journalism with like being creative?
Yeah.
And I think in so many ways, like, you can take a photograph and show a photo, and it doesn't matter what language your audience speaks. It doesn't matter where they are in the world. If you show them a photo that evokes some sort of emotion or tells a story, they're going to get it. So for me, like, that is in many ways the most powerful form of science communication, because if you can get a story that says a million words, then you don't need a million words. And it can be, imagery can be a very, very powerful thing. So yeah, I love photography. I mean, I'm not always very good at it. I take probably about 10,000 really bad photos before I get one that I'm even slightly
I understand.
It's great, but it's a creative process that I genuinely love for myself. And then if I happen to get a good one that I can share with people, I'm like, oh, that's good. I can talk to people better about this animal now because I've got a photo that illustrates it.
Yes, and photography is such an important tool that I love as well. So I do some like underwater photography here. And yeah, just I'm definitely with you with getting like 10,000 not great ones before you get that one shot you've been waiting for. But I've noticed the impact that it can have by just sharing a picture of a great hammerhead, just swimming in its environment too, and how powerful like that can be with the story along with it. But yeah, being able to just see that picture, connect with it, or ones of juvenile lemon sharks swimming in the mangroves, it helps people connect with it more. And also, with me being like in landlocked states, like growing up in landlocked states, seeing photography and a lot of that work that was on like social media and everything helped me stay connected with it too, because I could see that beautiful imagery. And I just wanted to learn more as much as I could about all of it.
Yeah. It is amazing, isn't it? I mean, I think this bit of research came out in lockdown, and I found it really fascinating because we know obviously being out in nature benefits our mental health and makes us feel
Yes.
good.
Yes.
But one of the scientists I was talking to said that actually by looking at, you know, a nature documentary or a beautiful wildlife photo,
Yeah.
it has not quite, but nearly the same level of like serotonin boost that we have by actually
Yes.
being there. And I found that amazing, the fact that we can have that kind of that boost, I suppose, to our mental health by looking at a photograph and stuff. So it's really important.
Incredible. Yeah, yeah, definitely.
It's really
Yeah, so then you talked a bit about your travels and being inspired to travel a lot because you wanted to get some of that science experience, but also did photography have any impact on your inspiration to travel, or were you inspired to start photographing the world around you while traveling?
I think probably I loved travel, and then photography came after that.
Yeah.
I was really lucky that like my stepdad's a zoologist as well, and
Okay.
he goes around, you know, he's been lucky enough to go around the world and be a science communicator and everything. So
Yeah.
whenever I could, I was taken along on those journeys since I was like 2 years old. So I've been really
Okay.
lucky to travel a fair bit,
Amazing.
and I'm like very, very privileged to have done so. And you know, that's something I'm forever grateful for and recognize. But yeah, I remember getting home, and like sometimes my mum would come, sometimes she wouldn't, and my dad would always be at home, and my family and friends would be here, and I always wanted to show them like what I'd seen or what I'd done. So you know, so having a camera, I could try and capture some of those moments and share
Yeah.
it when I got home, especially as a young child, when you want, you know, to kind of catch up with your family in that way when you get back. But yeah, and then I think I wasn't terrible. My framing wasn't totally awful, and not every photo was blurry. So it was, you know, I decided then I'd kind of get a digital camera after just using a little snappy thing, and
Cool.
give it a go. And I really loved it. I love photographing seabirds. Seabirds are really great to photograph.
Yeah, definitely.
They're often because there's like loads in one place.
True, true. I'm a huge bird lover, so I love photograph. I've seen some of your photographs of the penguins in Antarctica, was it? Oh my gosh,
Yeah.
that was incredible. But I guess since we're on that topic of it, what brought you to Antarctica?
Well, I first went when I was 12,
Okay,
and then I've been
wow.
lucky to go a couple times since. So, again, it was, I think my stepdad was doing a wildlife photography tour there,
Okay.
um, and yeah, there was a spare place on the boat, so I was, yeah. Thinking back on it, it seems so nuts, absolutely nuts, but um, it was just, yeah, it was incredible. It was really like formative, I think, because I went, and I remember this moment. We were in South Georgia in this king penguin colony, and I
Uh-huh.
was sat up, and there was this glacier to my right, that way, to my right, it's dyslexic.
Yeah.
And there's a glacier to my right, and all these like king penguins and these elephant seals on the beach, and the sun was setting, and it was glistening. It was stunning, and it was a moment that I just, you know, remember forever. And then I went back about, I don't know, it was like 8 years later, and that glacier just retreated. And
Oh
that for
my
me as a
gosh.
young person was like, you know, I was only, when had it retreated? I was about 17 or something when I'd seen that, and it really hit home about climate change, and it just made me acutely aware of what was going on in the world. So kind of by traveling and by taking photos, I could try and kind of document what I was seeing, to
Yeah.
try and then, you know, raise awareness back at home, because it was the same time of year and everything, but the
Mm,
landscape was just very different.
wow.
To see that firsthand, it was like, okay, yeah, got to do something about this.
It definitely makes you want to have even more of an impact as well.
Yeah, yeah, it makes you work a little bit harder for sure.
Yeah, definitely. So, a bit more about your travels as well. I see you went to work in Namibia. What did you do while there?
Wow, that was great fun. That was my first internship abroad on my own. I was 17, and I went off to Namibia for
Okay.
a month or 2 months or so. I can't remember. But it was great. I went to stay at a reserve called Africat, which is just a couple hours north of Windhoek, which is the
Hmm.
capital city. And Yeah, I was working there. I went and taught environmental education to
Oh,
the local school kids, and I took all the photos of their big cats that were in rehabilitation, going to be released into the reserve for adoption scheme. So I did a lot of photography, and yeah, I helped a lot with their kind of outreach and science communication stuff. I did something with porcupines,
ooh.
and it was great. It was just a really good opportunity to kind of get out my comfort zone, on my own for the first time. Previously, I traveled with family,
Mm.
and just yeah, kind of find my own feet and my, I guess, science communication style, which it was really great. It was really good.
Awesome. Cool. So then this brings me to some questions about the Bimini Shark Lab. So you had the opportunity to come here during some of your travels as well. So when were you at the lab? What brought you here? And how did you find out about the opportunity?
Well, so I first went to the lab. I think it was in 2018, I want to say, or 2019, I think.
Okay.
So I've been to the lab twice, with about 3 years apart. And I
Oh,
just, after
awesome.
leaving the lab, I just was like, I've got to go back and do it all over
Oh,
again. It's one of those places when you go and you get immersed in it, it just gets under your skin. And I still think about my time at the lab now, because it
yeah.
is just such an amazing place to be.
Yeah. Or in
Um,
my case, you'd never leave. You
yeah,
just
you know
stay.
what? I often dreamt about it.
Yeah.
Never leaving.
Yeah.
It's such a cool environment to be in, to meet like-minded people from all over the world,
Yeah.
and you're all kind of like mucking in it. It's like a lot of my family, when I got back, they'd be like, "Oh, did you have a nice month in the Bahamas?" And I'd be like, "It's really hard work. It wasn't, it's not just relaxing in the sun and
Right.
like,
Right.
it's tough. It is really hard work, but it's really rewarding and great fun, and just yeah, it's a brilliant place to be. And I found it because like I said, I've worked at the Wild Heart Trust, and I got to work with tigers. Then I went to Namibia, and I was working with like leopards and cheetahs. So I
Hmm.
worked with a lot of apex predators on land, and it kind of dawned on me that actually, like, I was missing like a huge element. And at this part, I hadn't really explored the sea very much. I just, like, my dad would take me swimming at the local swimming pool, but otherwise, like, my family were never people that just went to the sea. My
Yeah.
mum was scared of seaweed and hates the touch of sand and stuff. So like I didn't go to the ocean very much.
Mm.
But it's always something that I was just intrigued by. And then I was like, well, I want to get experience in that marine environment to know whether it's for me or not. And I love predators. I love how they shape, the ecology.
Hmm.
So I want to go work with sharks. So I kind of got on my laptop and I was like, right, where can I go and learn more about sharks? And then Bimini
Yeah.
popped up. I was like, yeah, that'll do.
Like perfect.
That'll do. So
Oh,
I put in an application, and yeah, I was thrilled to be off a few months later.
oh, really cool. What projects did you have the opportunity to assist with while you were here?
A number of lots of different projects.
Cool.
I got to work with Felicie, who did a lot of
Yeah.
personality projects,
So
and
cool.
yeah, it was great. Her project's great. She's brilliant.
She's
Um,
amazing.
yeah, she's very, very, very cool. And then, but it was Jean Sebastian Finger as well.
Okay.
Before, who was kind of took Felicie under his wing, and then Felicie kind of was the main personality researcher at the lab. And then I've worked with Matt, who Matt Smuggle.
Yep.
He was doing loads of stuff with the tiger sharks at the time, I believe.
Yep.
Yeah, I mean, I have so many different things going on. There's so many amazing projects that
Yeah.
I get to have a hand in. But I mean, I've always been interested in intelligence. I find intelligence and personality really fascinating.
Mhm.
So when Felicie was telling me about her PhD project, it was just it couldn't have been a better fit, because and also, what a great way to kind of give sharks a new reputation. You know,
Yes, exactly.
it was brilliant. And finding out that sharks have, like, these young lemon sharks have preferences for personality type on who they
Yes.
swim with, and some are more nervous and some are more bold. It was great. It was really good.
Yeah, which is incredible too, because we don't always want to say sometimes, like sometimes we look at the sharks and we're like, oh, cute, it's like a little puppy dog. Sometimes we don't like to say that because then we don't want people to be like, so then just think, oh, I can do anything with them too. But then to actually like have a quantitative way to say, no, they actually have individual personalities, and like this one's shy, this one's more exploratory, is really cool to think something like, and sometimes because we think because we're humans too, like we have all these like expressive personalities and we're the only ones that have person, but it's just not true. Like looking at and
Yeah.
something even like looking at a shark having a personality is so amazing and such a great conservation tool as well, a way to pair science with conservation.
Yeah, massively. And it is subjective. It is like we
Yeah.
have to, of course, you can't understand what's going on in another animal's brain. It's really hard.
Yeah.
But the fact that this kind of concept has been drawn up in this kind of experimental model to understand exactly how sharks, interact with new things in their environment and then work out their personality, it's just like it's so clever, and it's
It
one that
is.
you can't argue with. Like, I was reading a study saying that ants had personality, and it was fascinating. It was really cool. So why not sharks? Why shouldn't things have personalities? Obviously, there's going to be individual differences, individual difference in physiology. Why
Yeah.
wouldn't there be in personality and kind of psychology?
Absolutely. Yeah. So going along with some of the projects that you were able to assist with, what skills would you say have been transferable to what you do today and you've taken the most with you from this experience?
I think there's been so many different ones. I really love just being out in the field.
Yeah.
It taught me a lot. I spend long days still out in the field waiting
Yeah.
for wildlife to turn up to be able to film it,
Yeah.
or to be able to talk about it. So, I think, by being out in the field, by kind of having that kind of degree of understanding about a better understanding of animal behavior, and in sometimes some challenging environments. So sometimes it could be really stormy, sometimes it could be really hot and dry. It really kind of gives you that foundation to kind of build on, I suppose, when you're working with a career in wildlife, wanting a career in wildlife.
Hmm.
So that was always something that was really interesting. I would, I'd always really love it when people would come for a tour, because I would always be the first person to like put on my Bimini t-shirt and be like, I'll
Yes.
lead it. I'll take
Yes.
them around and show everyone what it is, because it's I really like communicating about animals.
Yes.
Especially, I still communicate about sharks all the time. Anytime I can squeeze in a story about sharks, I do it. So, anytime that people will come, they were tourists visiting from wherever they were in the world, I'd be the first one to be like, can I please just lead the tour? Because I think again, having those kind of face-to-face interaction certainly helped me building up my confidence, talking to people, and kind of being able to know what language to use and how to approach people, different types of people, different audiences,
Yes.
kids, adults, and so on. And so there's so many different skills, that you learn from these experiences, living with a group of people, very small quarters and stuff, which was brilliant, and they become some of your best friends. And
Yes.
I was speaking to a friend today who I met on my first time, 10 years ago, at the Shark Lab. I was still speaking to her
Oh.
today. So you build up these social relationships, and I think it all comes together to help you in your future goals, for
Yeah,
sure.
absolutely. And that's such a great way to put it, with talking about like the tours as well, because we've been so fortunate last year we were able to open up for tours again after like 2 years of nothing because of COVID, which was so sad. But yeah, we opened up for tours again. We actually have a tour group coming right now that some people are doing a tour for,
Your
which
hand.
is awesome. And it really does like I always like to say science is nothing if we can't share it with as many people as possible. And that's why, like, I'm sure you love doing what you're doing, being able to like share all that information with so many different types of people and practice different ways to share that information. That's why I love it so much too. I love just being able to talk to so many people about why they should care about our oceans and sharks in general.
Yeah, exactly. It's exactly that. And I think sometimes it can be hard, especially from like a scientist perspective, because
Yeah.
you're so, into your data and so into this. It can
Hmm.
sometimes be hard to kind of lift your head up and think, right, how do I then approach talking about
Hmm.
your work? So
Right.
that's what, I really love being able to do, is to try and like help scientists be
Hmm.
like, approach different platforms or approach different communication styles to be like, okay, this is what work I've done. Let's draw out the most interesting bits, and let's like talk to people about it in an entertaining, funny, kind of light-hearted way. And that sometimes can be like a tricky transition. So it's brilliant to be that kind of middleman and try and help
Definitely.
kind of get that message out there of all this amazing work that's going on.
Yeah, and I would say communicating our work is some of the most important skills that you have as a scientist too, because you have to be able to communicate them. You can do all the science, but you have to communicate it in a way, whether that's through like a publication or a documentary or through just giving a tour as well. That is some of the most tricky tools as well, but some of the most important tools that we have to know how to do.
Yeah, absolutely. And the lab definitely kind of covers all areas of that, because you have to do lots of publication writing from what
Yes.
I remember. And and then face-to-face stuff as well as online outreach.
Definitely. Yeah. So more of a fun question then. Do you have a favorite day or memory from your time at the lab?
Oh, but, you know, it's really hard.
I
Um,
know.
so many. Um, do you know what? I'm gonna my first experience with a shark.
Okay.
It's gonna have to be that because I had not actually seen sharks other than in aquariums before coming to the lab. So it was
Same.
my totally, yeah, it's amazing. So I'd have to say my first experience. I came. I can't remember which day I arrived on, but I arrived at the lab and it was just pretty much empty because
Yeah.
everybody was out setting long lines. And people then came back in and you say hi to everyone, you get settled, you do like you know, your first kind of little lesson about like, you know, what the lab is, its history, and then maybe you do like a little lesson on, I don't know, a miniature workup or something like that that
Mhm.
you all have to do if you're a new volunteer. And I remember kind of going to bed and being told, right, set your alarm. You got to be like 2:30 in the morning because you're on this check. And
Oh
it's like,
God.
okay, 2:30 in the morning, okay, and you have your pile of clothes ready. So when your alarm goes off, you can sneak out of the dorm and grab your stuff, trying not to wake everyone else up because
Uh-huh.
chances are they've just come in and gone to sleep.
Mhm.
And then you're out on the boat in the middle of the night, and I had no idea really what to expect. I didn't really know what was going on and what had been set up. I knew that there was a long line and there might be some sharks, there might not be, but the sky was clear and the stars in Bimini are just like unreal,
Gorgeous.
unreal. And I looked up and I was like, yeah, that's pretty cool. And then I looked down and there's bioluminescence, you know, on the
Oh.
sea. It's just like it's like the stars were reflected in the ocean, and it was like, yeah, yeah, this is amazing. And you know, I was just really enjoying that moment. And we got to the first long line. I think there were 3 long lines set up that night. First one, all the boys were at the water, which meant that the boys were, you know, there were no sharks there because if there's sharks, the boys slightly under the water.
Uh-huh.
So the first long line, no sharks. Second one, no sharks. Third one, we get to like, I think there was the second to last boy, and there was, I remember it in such detail, you can tell how great it was.
Yeah. I
Second
love
to last
it.
boy, it was like under the water, and there's shadow below. And it was a juvenile female tiger shark.
Oh.
And it was just like, it was so disproportionate. Tiger sharks, when they're young, are so disproportionate. Their head is
They are.
massive, so weird. They're massive heads and these kind of small bodies, but they're so beautiful. And I just heard this voice being like, right, grab the dorsal fin, help us grab the dorsal. And I hadn't been trained at this point,
Yeah.
so I was like, okay. And it was just the most amazing thing. And then to watch her swim off into the night, you know, under those stars, swimming off really strongly, it was just beautiful. And then I was like, right. I think I sent an email home. I was just like, yeah, I'm happy here. So you guys,
Yeah. It's like
I'm
you may not
staying.
be seeing me again.
Yeah, I'm happy. I'm set for life now.
Yeah. Oh, I love, oh my gosh, what an incredible experience. And like it's like no other. Truly, it really isn't.
No, that just that feeling of like being close to an animal like that um is really special, especially because like I didn't know I'd never worked with sharks before.
Yeah.
You know, I knew what I saw in the media about them, but I didn't believe it. But then to actually be like, yes, like I was right the whole time, these are incredibly curious, you know,
Yes.
amazing animals that deserve our respect and love. You know, and just to see that and be witness to like how the team moves so quickly to, you know,
Mhm.
minimize stress, and like how sleek and just seamless that effort was.
Yeah.
You know, it was some proper top scientists.
Yeah.
So it was a great opportunity to learn. And then by the end of the trip, I was leading the workups and stuff.
Yeah.
So it's amazing how quickly you learn and get on board with stuff. It's great.
Yeah, so so cool. So we've talked a lot about the large predators that you have worked with. So why are large predators in general so fascinating to you?
I think I really love an underdog. I quite like animals that people don't um that have like a misconception around them
Yep.
that people don't really understand. And I think with large predators, a lot of the time, you know, there's so much misinformation about them everywhere. So I really like kind of challenging that sort of reputation. And then I mean predators of all sorts. I'm really interested. I used to have praying mantises at home
Oh,
in my bedroom, and I used to love those because they're like really cool predators. So
yeah.
I'd always love it, but I was always drawn to the larger things just because I'm just so fascinated about how they shape their ecosystem.
Yes.
They do so much, you know, they really do kind of help, you know, regulate their prey species numbers, and they help, you know, mitigate disease and all this kind of stuff. And it's just fascinating how, you know, an animal which it doesn't necessarily always have a big abundance. Apex predators don't have to be huge in number. They can be small and still have a massive impact.
Mhm.
It was just incredible how these kind of species, which, you know, in the shark's case, have been basically unchanged by evolution for millions of years because they are pretty much perfect, how
Yeah.
they can just like look after a whole ecosystem. Like how does one species or a couple species do that?
Right, right.
So I just love, yeah, it's always being around a big predator. You're always going to get the hairs on the back of your neck to stand up. You're always going to
Yes,
be like in
yes.
awe. And I love that feeling as well of just being like, wow, that's impressive.
Right. And it always reminds me too, because in this day and age, like we can feel kind of disconnected from a lot of things, unfortunately, sometimes. And then when I'm in the presence of like a large predator too, sometimes it reminds me of like my place in this world. And like not that I'm small, but that like there's so much else out there just going on around me all the time too. And it's like it's always moving, always changing. Like just because I'm so caught up in my phone for a second there, that's not the whole world, you know?
Yeah,
Like yeah.
absolutely. It kind of reminds you that you are a part of that ecosystem and
Yes.
you are a part of that cycle, but it's hard to, people often think that humans, they disconnect humans with nature, but actually
Yeah.
you put yourself in front of a large predator, you'll be reminded very quickly that we are a part of nature. and
Right.
um and as long as we learn about these behaviors of these large animals, and we learn about how they function and why they do what they do and how they move and
Mhm.
everything, and we respect them. At the end of the day, I think respect is a key word.
Yeah.
We can really love them and learn to live alongside them
Yes.
peacefully.
Yes. And like you were mentioning earlier too, like we need nature because it's instrumental in our mental health, like from so many reports that have come out and everything. It just shows that like we belong in it and we belong like in nature, spending time there and spending time like around other things and learning how to coexist with a lot of these species as well.
Yeah, we've coexist for a very, very long time. It's just we've
Yeah.
forgotten how to do that because
Right.
we've,
Right.
built up walls, we've got, technology,
Hmm.
we've got everything that's kind of caused this kind of distraction and this barrier. But actually, the best thing for us sometimes is to, you know, pop down those distractions and go sit outside, whether it's going to listen to bird song,
Yeah.
in your back garden, or whether it's walking down to back beach and just seeing
Yeah.
the lemon sharks, like whatever is your local wildlife,
Yep.
like just sit for 5 minutes, just like breathe and reconnect to
Absolutely.
it. It doesn't, people have different bits that they love the most, and just go out and explore it.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. So moving into some of your work more as a TV wildlife presenter, what topics inspire you in this role? And can you explain a bit more about your work in this role too?
Yeah, sure. So, as I said before, I started my first documentary was in 2017, which
Mhm.
was the inside Vietnam's bear bar farming markets, which was on BBC Three.
Wow.
And then I did a whole host of different presenting roles. I presented for Al Jazeera, I did a behind the scenes of Extinction Rebellion. I don't know if you've heard of it. You have heard of Extinction
Yeah,
Rebellion?
I think
Behind the
so.
scenes,
Yeah.
yeah.
Mhm.
Which are a massive activist group in the UK, well, all around the world now. They've kind of
Yeah.
spread their reach out. So I was, following the founders of Extinction Rebellion around for a while, and I got trained in civil disobedience and what to do if a policeman comes up to you. So it was really interesting filming all of that.
Okay.
And I did a piece on plastic pollution and various different things. And then it all kind of like I was really happy doing what I was doing, and I was still doing science work, and I was like going to take on a master's, and it was really busy. And then, like with everyone else, COVID hit, and it hit hard, as it
Hmm.
did, of course, around the world. And I was isolating in the New Forest, which is in the south of England.
Mm.
Um, and I remember one morning there was a patch of celandines that came out, which are a beautiful yellow woodland flower that we get here. And they're very small. They kind of look like a little buttercup. They're very pretty yellow flowers. And they're a first sign of spring. And it was like, this is brilliant that this is happening here. And then it kind of dawned on us that actually how many people around the UK are getting to see a patch of celandines right now? Because are they living in the middle of the city? Are they just isolated away from woodland and it's not their kind of type of flower? How many people know that spring is coming? Because to us, that patch of celandines gave so much hope. So we decided we'd start something called the South Isolating Bird Club, which
Okay.
was a series of 150 episodes, I think, in the end, where
Wow.
we broadcast live for an hour every single day during lockdown from
Wow.
our garden.
Oh my
And
gosh.
we broadcast, and it had, in the end, over 1 million people watching.
That's
It was nuts.
incredible.
It was absolutely nuts. It was like it was just built this community of people from all around the world in the end who just wanted to connect with each other when everything was so disconnected. So we would talk about everything from like, you know, signs of spring that we were seeing, and we'd film it on our phones and we'd just post it on social media and then put it in, you know, this massive live stream every morning at 9 a.m. And then people would send us videos from around the world of what spring looked like where they were. And it was this huge community of people that just came together, and it was so beautiful. And there's still, you know, a Friends of South Isolating Bird Club Facebook group, and they still get together and meet up, and it's a beautiful thing. This community is just, it's wonderful. It's really, you know, it's a lovely thing to still be a part of. And then after that ended, I got the opportunity to present on BBC Springwatch, which in the UK is one of the biggest wildlife shows. It's a live show on BBC Two. And I was absolutely terrified. live to like 3 million people was absolutely terrifying, but loved every minute of it. And it kind of all snowballed from there, and then I've been kind of basically presenting ever since.
Okay. Incredible. Yeah, that's some amazing work, and it's so cool to hear like how it develops like as well too. And so why is TV wildlife, why is television and documentaries, why is that such an important tool in conservation storytelling?
Again, I think it's similar to the photography tool, you know. It can reach so many different kinds of audiences, and you're able to tell stories in very different ways. You know, I'm really into the kind of the non-conventional kind of nitty-gritty documentaries. I really like those. You know, so I think it, you know, media is so accessible to everybody now. Everyone can go online and watch a nature documentary, but for me it was just getting involved, bringing also a younger female audience into those environments, because growing up I didn't see any young females doing it. It was all kind of, you know, middle-aged white males, and I wanted to, you know, represent like young people into nature, because, you know, I mean, I'm 28 years old, so I hope I'm still representing slightly that but I wanted to be able to kind of talk and share my passion and love for wildlife. And I wanted, like I said before, there's a few stories that I really want to bring to the forefront, you know, the hard-hitting stuff. And I knew that, you know, in order to kind of be able to make those kind of documentaries, you have to kind of work your way up. And Springwatch is an amazing series. It's also, and I love doing it. It's great because it's really fun new science stuff. You know, I did a piece before about how fox skulls are changing in the last 50 years because of like humans, and it's just like the latest science of really cool nitty-gritty things. So I get to be really geeky on Springwatch, and then I get to also kind of help build my profile to kind of show other stories about you know, illegal wildlife trade, or you know, the extinction crisis and stuff that often aren't being spoken about. So it's a platform really, and it's a platform that I try and use to my best ability to kind of communicate issues which I think are important, or more importantly, give a voice to the people who should have one. So I can hand over my platform as much as I can do and be like, right, I built, you know, say what you need, say what you can say, kind of thing.
Incredible. Awesome. That's some amazing work you're doing, and awesome, like so many highlights from it as well already. And I'm excited to see like where it continues to go for you as well.
Thank you.
So I want to mention a bit about your book as well. So I saw you released a book in 2020 called Back to Nature: How to Love Life and Save It. What was the inspiration behind this book, and what is it about?
So I wrote that actually with my stepdad.
Oh, awesome.
So we wrote that in 2 months, in the height of lockdown, which like I've gone through writing a second book now, and I can tell you a bit more about that in a minute. But having gone through writing a second book, how I wrote the first one in like 2, I mean, I know it's half a book because we did it 50-50, but still 2 months. Crazy. But yeah, so we wrote that in the heart, Back to Nature in the heart of lockdown, and it's basically all about UK conservation pretty much. So but it definitely has elements of like that can be replicated internationally or around the world, and I'm sure lots of things will be very relatable, because the UK actually is one of the most nature depleted countries in Europe. So beautiful landscapes, and it does have some beautiful wildlife, but it is very, very much depleted. So we kind of wanted to give kind of a handbook of nature conservation. So it starts off about kind of individual conservation and what we can all do in our back gardens, then it builds into community conservation and group groups that can come together to, you know, whether it be saving a meadow or a woodland, and then it kind of builds up into politics and activism and rewilding. So it kind of goes from individual action to community action to kind of big action.
Cool.
So yeah, it was really good. And then, you know, within it, I was really keen to make sure that we didn't lose sight of why we're writing this book, which is ultimately because we all really love wildlife and nature. So, you know, throughout the book, I put little inserts about, again, kind of new science. So I did a whole essay on earthworm reproduction, how earthworms
Cool.
go on dates before they actually get down to copulating, which is really cool.
That is
You know,
cool.
I did like little snippets of really fun science things to like basically lighten the mood a little bit, because sometimes it get a bit heavy. So it was just like, you know, talking about kind of where conservation is going wrong and where it's going good, and then be like, oh, earthworm sex, great.
Amazing.
So it was a real mixture of different things. So it was really good to write it, actually. It was my first book writing experience. So
Cool.
yeah, nuts.
Yeah, that's incredible. So for anyone interested, where can they go to purchase this book?
Yeah, you can find it online. I suppose it depends where around the world you are.
Okay.
But a lot of bookshops in the UK, we've got Waterstones and stuff, will house it.
Cool.
I'm often reluctant to say the big terrifying company that you can just order and it will arrive the next day in
Yeah.
Gordon, because we all know the problems with that company. So if you can look at like local bookshops, then great. But if you can't, then it is there. But you know.
Cool. Awesome. So science communication, as we've talked about quite a bit, is more important now than ever. And you do a lot of various forms of it, from writing a book to utilizing television to appearing on podcasts even. So why is science communication so important to use in conservation in general?
I think because it reaches so many different types of audiences that would otherwise never have heard about these topics before.
Yeah.
So, you know, there's so many different types of science communication and so many types of different people that do it really brilliantly. And we've all got our own kind of, I don't know, a flair for it, I suppose. So it's about kind of like changing the traditional language when it comes to, I suppose, in this instance, environmental science communication.
Yeah.
So, you know, and just trying to change the narrative a little bit, because the news isn't always the most hopeful or most how should we say, positive and uplifting when it comes to environmental stories. So, you know, by trying to engage, it can be like off-putting. So you like, for my job, I suppose our job as a science communicator, I always think, is to try and like make it a little bit more uplifting, give people reason to hope and give people action. You know, it's all very good saying what's wrong, but okay, what can we do? So that's kind of the most important thing, and that's where I think science communication is going. It's kind of stating the facts, and then being like, right, this is the handbook on what we can do about it, which I think, you know, more and more people will be picking up for sure.
Definitely. Awesome. Cool. Yeah. And my last question for you, Megan, is what advice would you have for anyone trying to get into conservation, nature, storytelling in any capacity?
100% practical experience any day. And I always say this, it's honestly, get your hands stuck in. It doesn't matter where it is. You don't have to fly halfway around the world. You don't have to, you know, you don't have to go far. You don't have to spend a lot of money to do it. Just like locally, you know, there's like in the UK, we've got local wildlife trusts, RSPB. I'm sure there's the same thing. You've got like BirdLife International everywhere. You know, there's so many different things to do, whether it's like a wildlife hospital, but just start somewhere. You can just start in your own garden, you know, make your own research study, you know, look at the birds coming to your bird feeder, or, you know, there's so many different things that you can do on your own, but just get as much practical experience as you can. You know, if you want to get into science communication, if you have a phone, then you have a medium of doing that. Social media can be a terrifying place, but it also can be a brilliant place. And there's a lot of like-minded people who are incredibly supportive. So get talking, ask questions, and, you know, if you want to be in front of the camera, film yourself doing it, because that's the best way of practicing. And if you want to be behind the camera, again, just film on your phone, because it's honestly, it really does help.
Yeah, definitely. Awesome. Well, thank you so much for coming on today and speaking with me. And I guess I do have one final question that I feel like I have to ask. Do you have a favorite shark, and why?
Oh no. Do you know what? I have a bit of a trick answer to this one, because a lot of the time I get asked, what's your favorite animal?
Yeah.
And I have a great love for tigers. And my first shark that I ever saw was a tiger shark.
There we go.
So I just kind of like put the two together. So I would say tiger shark. Although, to be honest, I'm pretty sure if I'd seen a shark that day, I'd probably say that species I'm most
Yeah,
assuming.
that's fair.
Whoever one's in
Awesome.
front of me.
Yeah. Awesome. Yeah, well, thank you so much for coming on and sharing all your incredible stories. And I definitely think you inspired like any viewers that would be watching this today. But yeah, thank you so much for coming on. I'm sorry it's taken a while, but thank you for still being so willing to join.
Of course, no, thank you for having me, and I hope everything's going well at the lab.
Definitely. All right. Thank you so much, everyone. Bye.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.